The figures are between 16 to 20%. And in Israel, for example, there are like 15,000 buses and 5,000 missing bus drivers. In Japan, I'm there a week a month because it's our #1 market. And on top of the 20% shortage of bus drivers, they are in a situation where our customers, the public transportation operators, are telling us that 40% of their bus drivers are going to retire within the next decade. So they are in a crisis mode. And that's what we are trying to solve. Now, I'm not going to go through what are the benefits. I think that luckily for me, it was said a few times before by some of my colleagues here, because a bus is solving so many things or problems or issues that passenger vehicles are not solving, right? When you compare between the capacity of the buses versus robotaxis and their ability to take off vehicles off the road and congestion and green cities and whatever. So we're not going to cover that. So what we've seen happening in the last few years, and again, I represent the perspective of my customers, right, is that shift from pods that used to carry 6 to 9 passengers, drove 15, 20 sometimes kilometers per hour. They were not homologated to drive on public roads, and so on and so forth. We saw the customers asking for the buses that are used to operate, those larger buses, M3 category, that can carry 25 to 40 people within a bus, and they can drive on a public road on 50 kilometers per hour, right? Because it's an urban environment. So that's one thing that we've seen. So we integrated already with 5 different buses because we needed to have buses that are homologated to different countries. So we have an Austrian one, and a Spanish, and a Turkish, and a Japanese, and 2 Americans, and so on, because we are serving public transportation operators in different continents. And we continue doing that because different customers, they have different flavors of the buses that they prefer, and also some of the buses here are like 40 feet, which is 12 meters, and some are we have 7 meters, we have 10 meters, we have and we also have 8 meters. So we have all ranges because it depends on whether it's in a small city or whether it's in an airport where they want bigger capacity and stuff like that. So, but again, the requirements and the needs are not the same. It's very different between places. Because, for example, in Japan, again, there is a huge shortage of bus drivers. They don't want robotaxis whatsoever. They couldn't care less about it. They only want buses. My problem in Japan is that I could not have enough buses. So if anyone in the room is manufacturing buses that are Japanese homologated, please come speak with us, because I don't have enough for the Japan market. What I'm doing currently is that I'm taking buses that were built for the UK, and we managed to shift them a little bit in order for them to be homologated in Japan, and we use them in Japan. And we have also one Japanese bus that we are using. But again, the capacity, there is a capacity problem currently with AD ready. We talked previously about level 4 vehicles and what does it take to get to level 4 autonomous driving vehicle. So, it takes time. And there are not enough vehicles physically that are available for such implementations because they want many. The Japanese government made a plan 2 years ago, crisis mode, that they would like 100 cities with pilots of autonomous buses by the end of 2027. Where is Europe compared to that? Very far behind. And so congested cities, elderly population, buses. That's Japan. Now, in the US, it's different because there isn't a problem of shortage of drivers. And I met with the president of the American Bus Association and with similar, executives, and we have the unions like up here, so we can't really do many things that we're doing in Europe and in Japan. But the problems are different. They are not talking about drivers. Their incentives, what we hear in the US, is to solve rural areas. And it was mentioned before that we need to serve areas, that are much less served for economical reasons. So that's one thing. We hear a lot, especially now, before the midterm elections, about serving the underserved. I don't hear it much in Europe, but we hear it every week in the US, and they have those federal grants for that and stuff like that. So that's a big cause, and they want to use those funds in order to serve the underserved with better public transportation. And we hear a lot about corporate services. Apparently, in many cities across the US, and there are 350 cities in the US with over 100,000 people in a city, where they have many companies. I couldn't guess how many companies are that are providing such services of shuttles for corporates. That's a great service to do, because it's a fixed route shuttle, like in an airport, like in a commercial bus line, right? So it's simple compared to a robotaxi that takes from any A to any B. With a shuttle, it's like, the same route every day. You pick passengers, you pick employees, and you take them to Google, to Apple, to Boeing, and whatever. So that's a big market that exists in the US. And obviously, special events. Currently, in the US, they have bids for the Olympics, and they have bids for the Super Bowl, all autonomous driving bids, right, for buses. They want, like, for example, for the Olympics, 300 buses that will serve, people in cities where, they plan to have the Olympics. So that's another thing. And in Europe, again, we talked about it previously, congested cities, desire for mobile equity, fixed route options. And so in Europe, we offer also M1 sedans. We don't do it in Japan, nor in the US. We have buses, M3, and we have vans like the Ford e-Transit, which is very popular in the US. But in Europe, on top of that, we also offer robo shuttles, like sedans, like Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia Niro. Because in Europe there is, and it was mentioned many times before, that those robotaxis in cities and shuttles from train stations to airports and stuff like that. So same software, different vehicles, catering for different needs. And we do it without maps. That's one of our advantages. We are mapless, so I don't have to drive in a very specific geofenced areas like Waymos and Ubers and stuff like that. I can drive everywhere without that limit. And with a great unit economics, because we don't use LiDARs, we don't use radars, we don't use cloud, we don't use HD maps, we don't use high bandwidth communication. We use only, vision only. And we spoke a little bit earlier about economics and what does it take. What does it, and we do it again for M1, M2, and M3 category vehicles. So we believe that there is a place for everything, meaning it's not one size fits all. In different places, we will see different solutions. And all those different solutions, we are not an operator, we are just a software provider, right? And we integrate with the vehicle, and there are a few OEMs in the room, and we provide, that are making a lot of money out of it, because we're talking about, volumes of vehicles, and we provide those vehicles to our customers that are the operators. So it's kind of a win-win-win, right? Because the public earns out of it, better service, less congested cities, equality and stuff like that. The OEMs earn out of it because they sell more vehicles. We earn out of it, obviously, because that's our business. So it's, it's good for everyone. And the operators, by the way, it is expected that if you read all kinds of research about it, that the operating margin is expected to grow in the next decade between 5 to 15% because of shift to autonomous driving vehicles. Why is that? Because they can do, and that's my last sentence, they can do a lot of more top-line revenues because many of them are not being paid by the number of passengers. They are being paid by mileage. And when you can put many more buses on the road during peak hours, morning and afternoon, you are increasing substantially your top line because you earn so many more miles. So again, everyone are happy out of it. And we truly believe that this is the future. So thank you for listening.